Introducing
Real estate people.
Hey, we're the Bills! What are you talking about, Willis?
We're the real estate people.
All right.
Wow, we've been shooting for like 3 days in a row, man. Whew.
I was driving here and I was thinking, how can I start this? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night to all of our. In the first few episodes, I was toying around with like a slogan or like what do you call it? Like a what's that little tagline? I thought that'd be fun if we could come up with something at some point. Just riff on it. We were like, Real Estate People Podcast, the podcast for the people in real estate. And then it was
Something so catchy for everybody.
Yeah. Or we never land on it. I listened to a podcast called Comedy Bang Bang, and he has catchphrase submissions, and he like does one every episode from one of the listeners. And then he's like, I don't know if that one's going to stick. And he's been doing the podcast for years, and that's cool. His whole thing. So anyways, Nick, glad to be back in the studio with you. We are in the middle of a series on selling a home. We've done the buying thing. Now we're talking about selling. Last episode, we talked about coming up with the list price, and that listing agreement and how you come to that price. And usually in that conversation, it's inevitably brought up, obviously, commissions and closing costs, right? I'm selling a house. I have an idea what I'd like to sell the house for, but I know I'm not walking away with all that money. Where does some of it go? How much is it? Why, what is the commission? Who is paid from it? Why is it so much? All those questions. And so I figure we dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, and this is a tough conversation, but it's a conversation that needs to be had. Commission is negotiable. You know what I mean? Like there's no one out here driving this industry that says you have to charge X amount of dollars for commission. There's situations where we do stuff for less than other times because of whatever circumstances are in front. But at the end of the day, commission is a trade-off for time and energy, right? Like as humans, we have these three resources: money, time, and energy. And you can't have all three, right? So if someone's putting in the time and the energy that it takes to be successful with selling something, they're going to receive a commission for doing so.
Absolutely. But the key thing that you just said is it's negotiable. I don't know if a lot of people know that you can actually negotiate a commission amount.
Yeah, and typically in residential real estate, the commission is paid by the seller. So part of signing that paperwork, the seller's saying, I'm going to list my house for $250,000, and of that $250,000, I'm going to pay X amount in commission. And of that total amount of gross commission, there's a percentage of it that goes to the buy side, and then a percentage of it that stays with the listing agent for helping the seller execute. So I'd like to start with the buy side commission, because that's like the easy commission for realtors to sell. Now, there's no standard that says you have to pay a buyer's agent X percent or X amount, but it's expected in the industry as an agent that if you're going to be selling somebody else's listing, that at least you're going to get 2.5%. So put yourself in the shoes of a buyer's agent, right? Who's got 10 houses that may work for their buyer. And those 10 houses all have varying amounts of commission that are paid to said buyer's agent if they sell that listing. So if your listing is marketing that you're paying 1% commission to the buyer's agent, but all the other 9 are paying the buyer's agent 3%, then the buyer's agents are going to be more motivated to go sell the other houses and not that seller's listing that's only offering 1%. So that's an easy one to sell to somebody, that we have to offer the buyer's agent at least 2.5%. And then it's industry standard to offer the other buyer's agent 3 points. And we need them to sell. Like a lot of times those other buyer's agents have relationships with the best buyer for your house. And you have to compensate them for bringing the buyer to that listing and selling that home.
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides of it. You're paying an agent to, like, the seller is the one that's making the decision to sell, right? So they're hiring a professional to help them market the house, but they're also relying on all the other agents in the industry to bring a buyer.
We just had a conversation. We just had a conversation with somebody who sent us a listing, and they're only offering 2% on the buy side. That was the first thing that I said as an agent here. Now, money's not the only thing. I don't know if this is going to come through, but like this was literally just said that this listing is only offering 2% to the buyer's side. So right at the very beginning of seeing this as an agent, this motherfucker who listed this house is cheap as hell. They're offering 2%. So what do you think that listing agent's getting paid if they're only offering the buy side too? So this guy's probably doing it for 1 point on the seller side. And now that seller's only paying 3% commission, but nobody is motivated to sell this. And the listing agent who's getting even less is not even motivated to market it. So you got to be very careful. Like commission is a part of this transaction if you're hiring somebody to sell your house in the retail way. It costs money to do so.
Yeah. I have this feeling coming up in me that just feels awkward about it. And I know that the conversation around commission can be awkward. And the reason I'm feeling awkward is the idea that if I'm a buyer's agent and I see that only 1 or 2% is offered to me, that I would be less motivated to show my buyer. That feels kind of weird to me. You know what I mean? Because our service to our clients is
to show them everything.
We want to show you everything. We want to get you into the best house possible. And we always tell people, money for us comes second. What comes first is your satisfaction.
Right.
And so
you can't not show somebody a house because the commission offered on a specific listing is less than industry standard.
Right.
Because the buyer's going to go see that house anyways, with you or without you.
Yeah.
So like we never use money to block us. Like it's never going to block us. Right. And we could also have a conversation with the listing agent, right? Who can have a conversation with the seller that, we want more on this house for whatever reason. It's never going to block us, but dude, most people in this world are motivated by money. And when you set your listing up to only give a shallow amount to the buy side, you're just setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
So this dude is 1 day on the market. This thing's already toast. Forget about it. And you know what I mean? Like it's done. It's already set up for failure. And you could see that as you look through that listing too, how incomplete that listing is, how incomplete the photos are, how incomplete the listing preparation was. And like, I would like to blast this guy for some reason. So look it up and let us know what your thoughts are on 309 Beard. Half finished house for $750,000 with only 2% offered to the buy side. And that listing agent is just an order taker.
Dang, shots fired. But yeah,
we could shoot some shots, right? I like it. Is that okay, Ashley?
I like it. You got to realize
it all means something, though. That's the whole point of all of this. And when you do this every day, you understand what all of these little things mean and how to put people in positions to succeed. And when you don't do it every day, you're going to sacrifice something.
Yeah. I was working with a buyer for a while, like showed him a lot of houses, and he was recognizing the amount of work and effort that I was putting in, getting back to him all the time, showing him houses, being available to show them the houses. And the one that he ended up wanting, they were offering me a low amount. And that was almost a deal breaker for him. He's like, do they not realize how much work you're doing? And he actually offered to make up the difference for me, because he saw that being a buyer's agent is not easy.
It's a hard job. And it's been a very hard job for the last 7 to 10 years for anybody that was exclusively or predominantly on the buy side of a transaction.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit different now, but we were saying like a few years ago that it takes buyers, like you got to look at 5 houses to offer on one, and then you have to write 3 or 4 offers before you understand how competitive you need to be to get the next one. So you're talking about 20, 30, 40 houses per buyer, half hour per showing. It's labor intensive on the buy side of a transaction. Mm-hmm. And you need to be like extremely responsive, right? As soon as that new listing comes on the market, that buyer to be in the best position to buy that thing, you got to be out there showing that house that day.
Definitely.
Right. And and you bring up a very good point. Like you need to entice that person to come sell this house versus the neighbor's house.
Right. Yeah.
But that's just on the buy side, right? The listing commission, it's even harder for agents to stand up, right? Because most agents like listen to somebody on what they want for price 309 Beard, and just put it on the market, whatever the seller wants. The seller's dictating that whole situation. And I guarantee you, and in the next time we film, this thing will still be on the market. I'll put my license on the line. Right? Because like you're order taking, right?
Yeah.
Versus just setting this situation up for maximum success.
Yeah.
And there's a fee to do that. Like where do you go in this world and you get there's nothing for free. Right? So you're going to pay, you could pay less commission, but you know, the situation is going to be compromised somehow.
Yeah.
Especially when you do it with yourself, because that's when it's even more emotional, right? So you get price wrong, or you sacrifice at the inspection, or you don't do a good job negotiating the best possible deal. The negotiation is really where that commission is earned.
Yeah. You know, there's not a set percentage necessarily by law or anything like that. We talked about how it's negotiable, but there is kind of an industry standard. And when we go out to a restaurant, I mean, if you're a decent person and you're going to go and spend money on dinner around here, you know, especially if you've been a server before, you know that it's like 15 to 20%, even more sometimes. And that's just the standard. If you're tipping less than that, then maybe you shouldn't be eating out, right? Like you're basically like helping that person put food on their own plate by having them bring you food on a plate.
Right.
And I think the same is true here. I had a conversation with a seller. You know, sometimes it's real nice and like cordial until commission comes up, and all of a sudden the client gets like real stern and like gets into their negotiation, like Scarface mode or something. Mm-hmm. And he was like, you know, I have people that can do it for 1%. And I was asking them the industry standard, 3% for me, 3% to the buy side. And he goes, I know people will do it for 1% total. And I was like, well, honestly, number one, you get what you pay for. I just told you all of the services that I'm going to be providing to you, you know, marketing, negotiating on your behalf, handling all the paperwork, coordinating showings, navigating complex legal work and guiding you along the way, all the way through. I'll give you 100% of my attention. If you want to pay someone 1%, then why are we talking? You know, with respect,
there's
you
a ton
can do whatever
of
you
people
want.
that'll do it even for less than one. You can get your home in the MLS for like $500 with a lot of these companies. Yeah. But then you're still going to have to do all the work that it takes to be successful within that sale. But at least you have MLS access. But then you have to like coordinate all of the access, have those conversations, stand up the price yourself.
Yeah.
And we just did a whole episode on pricing, right? Like you get the price wrong, you're fucked. You know, the rest of it doesn't matter if you get the price wrong, because then you got to get the price right before you could ever like move forward through that like sales funnel of selling your house.
Right.
How much does 2% actually equate to?
2% on a $200,000 house is
4 racks,
$4,000.
So it's always not always, most of the time it's based on a percentage of the sale price.
Yeah. Now, some situations I've even seen you do this where if you're selling a house, let's say for $50,000, 2% of that is
what's that, $1,000?
Right. So we're still giving the same level of service, all the things that we're going to do. We're going to get professional pictures. We're going to market the hell out of it. We're going to do our best. And $1,000, I mean, that barely covers our taxes. So in situations like that, sometimes we come up with a flat fee.
Yeah, because there's still X amount of hours that it takes to get something done successfully, right?
We at least want to cover our costs and then hopefully make a little bit of money.
Yeah, when you start to conceptualize like how much time actually goes into this process, like if you're really good and you have a lot of experience selling like whatever type of asset you're pricing, if you do that pricing right, that's going to take you 10 to 20 hours. And there's like probably 45 phone calls back and forth through that process. So it's time and energy, 20 hours just on pricing, right? And then you need to have the distribution outlet set up to get that listing out to the public, right? So that's access to the MLS, which then feeds all of the consumer sites out there. If it's a commercial piece of real estate, you need a LoopNet account, you need a Crexi account. Like you could have $2,500 per month in just listing platform cost to be able to put the right listing in the right channel, right?
So the right eyes get on it.
And that's just listing prep. And then there's like 2 hours in making that listing perfect. By the time you're done, like making sure you have the right square footage, the right bedrooms, the right baths, the right
calling the
measurements.
municipality, getting the right tax amounts, stuff like that.
Yeah, getting all like crafting the listing, like that's another couple hours. So now you're 25 hours into this situation before you've even listed the house.
Yeah.
Right. And then the expertise that goes into like, what should we price it at? What should we do prior to listing to maximize position? That's intangible stuff like that only comes with experience. Right.
Yeah.
So now like people are going to like judge you just per this transaction today on what your commission is. But no, you're paying me for the 1,000 times we've done this already. Like the 400 other single family ranches that we've sold in Amherst.
Right. You pay, for a place that we talked about, Frank's Plumbing, Frank's Basements. Like they are the best in the business. And sometimes you pay a little bit more, but they're going to do it right. They have the expertise and the know-how to do it.
Right. That's 25 hours before you're listed.
Yeah.
And work. Right. And then once you get listed, now you pass that file off to the marketing department who does their just listed, just sold, costs money. You have cold callers that call the neighborhood, inviting the sellers to help us sell this, right? To find a really good neighbor for you, time, energy, money, right? So then how far are you taking this thing from a marketing angle? Or are you the agent that's just putting the sign in the ground, putting it on the MLS, and then praying someone comes and sells it? Yeah. That ain't worth 6%.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's a discounted listing service right there. And that's what this all comes down to. Like, how do you stand up the commission, right? What is the value prop? And more marketing is not always going to mean something to everybody, right? So you just got to really get really good with what your value prop is. We've been here. We've done this. That's very important when selling your house.
Yeah. And there's so much that goes on beyond, like behind the scenes, what a realtor does on a day-to-day basis for their clients that is just unseen. I mean, I think all these shows like, these $1 million listings and whatever, like Selling Sunset or whatever, you see just the public facing side of what being a realtor is. Like you're just going out, shaking hands, showing houses, and then you make 3%. Oh my God, how do they make that much money on one transaction? They just sell a house and they make a few $1,000s. That's ridiculous. But not only is it all the stuff that leads up to getting the house under contract, where you actually like have a sale, but then there's 2 months of work after that.
Right.
You're working with a seller for about 3 months typically, and you're giving them a lot of time and attention and energy.
Dude, you still, and in every situation, you still have at least 2 hours of negotiating. In the market that we've been in today, that's closer to 10 hours. Sometimes those 10 hours span over the course of 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
There's so much into this. Like if your realtor is negotiating commission before they've even started working on the process, how are they going to treat your money throughout this transaction, right? If they're so willing to whack their commission at the beginning, how are they going to treat your $50,000 when you're not even in the room when they're having these conversations about selling your house?
Yeah. Now, obviously, there's a lot of passion and like perspectives about this from us because we deal with this all the time. But I think it is such a fair question for a seller to ask, hey, what's your commission? Or even, why is it so high? That seems like a lot for one transaction. There's nothing wrong with asking those questions.
No.
But if we take the time and we explain to you all the costs and all of the time and all the energy that we're going to be putting into it, and we actually tell you what our value proposition is, and then you want to undercut it, well, then that sometimes is a decision on our part to recommend that you go with the person that's only charging 1%.
And
if you're going to pay me 3%, you're going to get 3% service or more.
Right. And that's really how you got to break it down to people. Like, it's just the way things are done, right? On the buy side of a transaction, the buyer pays all the closing costs with having the lender involved. On that same transaction, the seller is paying most of those closing costs, including both broker fees. But it depends on how you look at things, right? Like, the seller is only paying 6% if they get the price that they agreed upon in that listing agreement of X amount.
Sure.
Right. So technically the buyer is still really paying it. Do you know what I mean? Because the seller is not agreeing to sell it unless they get X amount and that commission's already agreed upon prior to that conversation. So like technically the buyer is still paying it, but it's a touchy subject. You know, it's money. Like, and as an agent, you need to get really good with asking people to pay you. And we tell that to our team all the time. Like, in this world that we're living in, it's really hard to see beyond your own shadow to understand somebody else's perspective because of all the things that happen in life. And the people that win are the people that are able to put their position last, do the service, and then get paid at the end. But you could have like the most insanely successful transaction that could possibly be had. And then still at the end of that deal, the seller is seeing a closing statement that has X amount of dollars, every transaction going to a broker. And they feel as if they were, you know, punched in the face in a sense, right? At the end of this whole, and that's the only thing they're remembering is how much they paid to do that versus like how successful this thing was over the course of the last, 60 to 75 days or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But what you're really doing is you're building a relationship with someone who knows how to do real estate well.
Yeah.
That's what the commission is.
And even after all the work and us explaining like the reason for the amount, there are so many things that happen to that money before it ends up in our pockets.
Oh yeah.
I'm not walking away with 3%.
No,
in my pocket.
Right. And then depending on how your team is, like there's operating expenses that go into like facilitating this whole thing.
Yeah.
Like we have transaction coordinators with salaries. We have marketing people with salaries. But guess what they do really well? They transact really well and they market really well.
Yeah.
And our agents price really well. Right. So it is a team effort to make sure that you are repeatedly meeting people's expectations within a real estate transaction.
Yeah. There's also brokerage splits. So to be operating as a licensed realtor, at least in New York, I don't know how it works in different states, you have to hang your license with a brokerage where we hang ours with Keller Williams, and they take a certain percent right off the top. And then there's taxes, right? And then there's operating expenses, all the things we talked about. Team splits too, right? And so, we're not all like driving Lamborghinis.
No, you have to do 50 to 100 transactions a year to actually see like a substantial amount of commission income. And then that's a cash flow business in a sense, right? You're only as good as your last deal then because there's nothing that's guaranteeing somebody's coming back the next month. And because of the amount of space between people's transactions, right? Like mostly it's 3 to 5 years before somebody like sells the house they bought. And then that's 3 to 5 years of how many realtors is somebody meeting in a 3 to 5 year period? How many of their family members are getting licensed in a 3 to 5 year period? So because of the space between the transaction and the amount of people that are in the industry, like there's nothing guaranteeing that you're in that situation in the future.
Yeah.
Right. So, but if we staff the right people and build the right processes and systems, like those people will stay in our ecosystem, but it costs money to do so.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
But
So
commission is so touchy, man. Like, but there's some people that like negotiate and there's some people that don't. Some people,
it's not always an argument at all.
they're just asking you, but like the person then would feel like someone's negotiating, but they really just asked you what your rate is to make sure it's within market, right?
Yeah. I worked for a contractor. He's a general contractor, and he's a really good friend of mine, and he asked how much we charge, and I said, typically it's 6%, 3 to me, 3 to the other side, but since you're my friend, I'd love to give you a deal. And he goes, no, don't give me a deal. He's like, I understand what it's like to be paid for my service, and I want to pay you what you're worth.
And that's a true friend.
100%.
A true friend is not knocking your fees down for you prior to providing a service for them.
Yeah. So this whole conversation is around how much it costs to actually sell a house, right? You know what your profit is, but how much does it cost? We talked about commission. Can we do just a quick breakdown, because we're almost out of time, about closing costs? How can someone quickly kind of get an idea of what their closing costs are going to be at the end of the transaction?
So I always use a general rule of thumb of about 2% of the sale price in closing cost outside of commission. So whatever you agree to pay your realtor for commission is X amount. And then you'll have about 2% more expenses on top of that percentage amount to understand what your net is as a seller per transaction. So you could assume like the average commission 6%, 2% more is 8% total. So you're going to net approximately about 92% of the sale price, like in your take home pocket once everybody's paid.
Okay.
And now everybody means your lawyer, your brokers, the title company who updates the title. That's a requirement to update prior to closing. Getting a new survey, which is a requirement of most lenders per transaction, that the survey is dated post the contract date to protect the bank's interest. So you have broker, lawyer, search, survey.
Transfer tax?
Yep. Transfer tax is normally paid by the seller. At least the way our board contracts are written, these closing costs are typically paid by the buyer. Now, again, everything is negotiable. So, there's flex somewhere if you need it, but.
And then transfer tax it's $9 for every $1,000 of the purchase price.
Yes,
right?
for Erie County. Now, Niagara County is going to have a different rate per 1,000.
Okay. And
then there's also, if you're a senior, there's discounts. It's in Erie County, it's not $9. If you're a senior, maybe it's $6. I'd have to.
But that calculation is, $300,000 house divided by 1,000. Multiply that by 9.
And that's paid to Erie County.
Tax.
Yeah, that's Erie County transfer taxes. The buyer normally picks up the fee to record the deed. And then there's other, there's smaller fees. If, say, the property's in an LLC, you need to have an LLC affidavit. So that could be an additional $50. But for a general rule of thumb, 2% more than your broker amount should be about approximately what the net is to a seller.
So based on that math, if you were to sell a house for $300,000, skim 8% for the commission and closing costs, you're walking away with $276,000 minus whatever you still owe the bank from when you bought it.
Yep. And that's your net as a seller.
Yep.
But when you look at that right now, what's 300,000 minus 276? That's 24. Is that 24 grand?
Yeah.
So that's $24,000 that you just asked somebody to pay you to hire you to sell your house. That's a lot of money. You got to back that up. And it's not hard to back it up because, if you price it right, show it right, sell it right. And a lot of this is in the negotiation, man.
Yeah.
It's all in the negotiation. That's my favorite part of this job actually, is negotiating.
I know it is.
And I have this visual in my head of tipping people upside down and shaking them by their ankles until every penny falls out of their pockets. And then you did the best job you could possibly do for a seller.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, I think that's it. And, I want to make sure that in our show notes, we have some of these equations and stuff. I'll make sure that happens. And then we also have a pretty simple website. We'll put a link there too for our podcast. We'd love it if you share with your friends, or if you have somebody who's thinking about selling, send them the podcast. We'd love to work with them, or at least give them the tips and tricks that they need to make it happen.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, if we're shooting this podcast based on feedback from the people listening to it, we're going to shoot podcasts that mean stuff to the people listening. So comment, share, ask questions, and we'll do specific episodes relating to, what people have questions about within this legacy traditional industry that we play in.
Nice. That actually could be our tagline, is Real Estate People Podcast. The podcast that means stuff to the people who listen.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time. Thanks, Nick. One of the funniest things about real estate to me, being a couple of years in, is how archaic the whole process is. I mean, we're emailing each other. Sometimes I'll take an offer and I'll strap it to a dove and I'll send it off to the other agent, and I don't hear back until the bottle comes back in the sea and I pick it up, and it takes years. I'm just kidding. But it's old fashioned. And when you're dealing with negotiating and offering and all that stuff, you're just going on there's got to be a lot of trust there between the other person and you, the other agent and you. And sometimes, I'll send an offer and my email gets stuck in spam and they don't get it. And then I'm texting, and there's so many different forms of communication. Wouldn't it be great if there was one spot to take care of all this, just increasing the transparency and the ease of use in the real estate agent industry?
Yeah, OfferWell. It's real estate made simple for realtors. And real estate offers today are done via phone call, text message, and email.
Yeah.
And we know that those methods of communication were not designed to manage the complexity of a real estate offering situation. So there's tons of software out there to help agents automate a lot of mundane work, but get a software that actually works, that actually solves the problem. Our team has seen tremendous success using OfferWell for all things relating to offers. And with more software and more automation, you can spend more time with your family or more time doing more deals.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a simple process. You go on, you make the offer, you fill out a form, and actually there's even technology you guys have added where you can just upload documents and the thing scans the documents and fills out the form for you, which just feels like space age stuff that I don't even understand how that works. It's like magic. And then as a listing agent, you get all these offers and a really beautiful web page that you can sort the offers based on all different kinds of things. And you just have something amazing to show your seller when you're presenting offers. You look like a rock star using this thing.
Yes, it's a good way to stand up your commission too with the seller. It gives you an opportunity to show them your work while negotiating deals. And it gives them, what they deserve is that bird's eye view into all of the offers that they ever receive on their house. I mean, that's something that is important to a seller. So OfferWell helps you automate all of that stuff and bring more transparency and confidence to the consumers of real estate.
It's a game changer, 100%.
Offerwell.com. Coming to a market near you.